Christmas dinner at Grandma Beatrice's house always feels like stepping into a picture that was made to impress strangers. Her place in Kensington, London, England is the kind of house where the lights look soft on purpose, where the floor doesn't creak, and where even the air smells expensive. The hallway is wide, the walls are covered with framed photos of people who look like they never worry, and the dining room table is so long it makes a family feel smaller than it should. I arrived early because I always do. Being early means I can breathe before the room fills up, and it means I can help my mother without being asked. My mother, Elena, was already in the kitchen, smoothing her hands on her dress like she was trying to iron out her nerves. My father, Martin, sat in the living room with a cup of tea he wasn't really drinking, staring at the fire like it might give him answers. He used to be the kind of man who stood tall, without thinking. Now he looked like he was carrying a heavy bag on the inside, one nobody else could see. Grandma's staff moved around us quietly, polite and fast. I wanted to tell them not to whisper, that we were not royalty, but I kept my mouth shut. In Grandma's house, silence is a rule, and rules always seem to belong to her. When the family finally arrived, the air changed. My Uncle Graham brought his loud laugh and his strong cologne, like he wanted attention before he even spoke. My Aunt Nina kissed everyone twice and adjusted her hair every time she passed a mirror. My cousin Lily, who is only 20 but acts older, took out her phone and filmed the turkey as if it was a celebrity. Even the way they sat down felt planned, like everyone knew their position. I sat near the end of the table, where the light from the chandelier was a little softer and where it felt easier to be forgotten. Grandma Beatrice entered last, as always, with pearls at her neck and calm in her face. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Everyone paused for her, without being told. She looked around the table like a queen checking her court, and her eyes stopped on me for half a second. It was long enough to make my stomach tighten. People say she's a billionaire, and I believe it because she talks about money the way most people talk about weather. I've seen her sign a check for £50,000 like it was a small thing, and I've heard her complain about a £2,000 bill like it was insulting. Dinner began with the usual noise, forks and glasses, small talk that sounded friendly, but felt sharp under the surface. I tried to keep my face calm. I laughed when others laughed. I nodded when someone spoke to me. I focused on simple things, like the warmth of the bread and the sound of the gravy being poured. I told myself to get through it the way I always did, quietly, carefully, without giving Grandma a reason to aim her words at me. Then Grandma lifted her glass, and the room quieted, as if someone turned down the volume. She didn't toast to family or love. She didn't say anything sweet. She looked directly at me and said, clear as a knife, there is no difficulty in managing the business. How big is the profit of the new trend company? For a moment, I truly didn't understand what I was hearing. My mind searched for the right response, but found nothing because I don't manage any company. I don't even work in an office. The shock hit my hands first. My fingers loosened, and my wine glass slipped, fell, and shattered on the floor. Red spread across the pale rug like a stain that wouldn't forgive me. Grandma gave a short laugh, not warm, not surprised, and said, "What a joke." I froze, my heart pounding so loud I could almost hear it. Everyone stared. My face burned with shame, and I wanted to disappear under the table. But Grandma didn't look at the broken glass.
She didn't look at me.
She turned her head slowly and focused on my father instead. Her voice stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. "You are in my family hospital," she said, "because everything has been taken away from them." My father's eyes flickered, and my mother's hand tightened on her napkin. I sat there with my hands trembling in my lap, realizing Grandma hadn't asked that question by accident. She had asked it to remind us, in front of everyone, exactly who still had power. After the glass broke, the dinner didn't stop, but it didn't feel like dinner anymore. A staff member I barely knew, a woman named Ruth, hurried in with a cloth and a small broom, cleaning up the mess like it was nothing. The sound of the broken pieces being swept into a pan made my stomach twist. My cousin Lily lowered her phone and stared at her plate, and even Uncle Graham suddenly forgot how to be loud. Grandma Beatrice kept eating as if the floor hadn't turned red, as if I hadn't just fallen apart in front of everyone. My hands stayed in my lap, shaking under the table, and I forced myself to breathe through my nose so no one could hear how close I was to crying. When dinner finally ended, the family scattered through the house in small groups, like they were avoiding the smoke after a fire. Some went to the sitting room for brandy. Some drifted into the hallway to whisper. I walked away slowly, trying to look normal, even though my chest felt tight. In the upstairs bathroom, I locked the door and turned on the tap so the running water could cover any sound I made. I leaned over the sink and stared at myself. My eyes looked too wide, like I had seen something I couldn't unsee. I thought about what Grandma asked and felt the same shock all over again. Profit. New trend. Those words didn't belong to me. The only numbers I knew were my hours and my rent. I wanted to run out of the house, but I couldn't leave my parents behind. So I went down the hall and found my mother, Elena, near the library door, pressing her fingers to her lips as if she could keep her worry from spilling out. "Harper," she whispered, "stay calm. Please." Her voice was soft, but her eyes looked tired. Behind her, through the half-open door, I could see my father, Martin, sitting in a deep chair with his shoulders rounded. The library in Grandma's London house always feels colder than the rest of the rooms, full of heavy books and quiet judgment. I stepped inside, and my father looked up at me like he was already apologizing without speaking. "Tell me the truth," I said, because I didn't have the strength to go in circles. Why did she ask me about new trend? My father's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced toward the door, like he expected Grandma to appear at any second. "Harper," he said, "I didn't think she'd do it like that." My stomach dropped. "Do what?" I asked. "Say it out loud." He rubbed his forehead with one hand. His fingers shook. "I told her you were involved," he admitted. "I told her you were helping manage things. I told her you could handle the profit questions." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. It felt like the floor had tilted. "You lied about me," I said, and my voice sounded thin, like it didn't belong to me either. My mother stepped in quickly. "He was trying to protect us," she said. "He thought if your grandmother believed you were part of the business, she'd stop pushing so hard." I stared at them both. "Protect us?" I repeated. "By using me?" My father's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He looked like a man who had run out of choices. "I didn't know what else to do," he said. "After the house in Bristol was taken, after the lawyers, after the accounts, she started treating us like we were begging at her door. Then I got sick. She offered the clinic, the family hospital. But nothing is free with her, Harper. Nothing." He swallowed, then added, "I thought if she believed you had value to her company, she'd keep us afloat." I sat on the edge of a leather chair and tried to steady my breathing. My mind ran back to my real life, the one nobody at that table asked about. Every morning in Manchester, England, I put on my cleaner's uniform and take the tram to the Riverside Hotel. My manager Diane hands out room lists like they're battle plans. My coworker Paula jokes to keep us from feeling the ache in our backs. I scrub sinks, wipe mirrors, and fold towels until my wrists hurt. Sometimes a guest leaves $10 on the bedside table, and I feel grateful and embarrassed at the same time. On my best weeks, after rent and food, I might have 40 pounds left. That is my world. Not profits, not boardrooms, not new trend. My father looked at me carefully. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix it." But I shook my head. "You can't fix it," I said, quiet but firm. Because she didn't just ask me a question. She did it to show everyone that we're nothing without her. My mother's eyes shone with tears, and she reached for my hand. I let her hold it, but my thoughts were already moving. If Grandma wanted numbers, if she wanted power, then I needed to stop shaking every time she spoke. I didn't know yet how I would do it, but I knew one thing clearly as I sat in that cold library in London, England. I couldn't live as someone else's lie anymore, not even for family, not even for love. The next morning, Grandma Beatrice's house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath after the night before. I slept in a guest room with thick curtains and a bed that was softer than anything I could afford, but I didn't feel rested. My mind kept replaying Grandma's question and my father's confession. When I went downstairs, the kitchen smelled like coffee and warm bread, yet my stomach stayed knotted. My mother, Elena, sat at the table with a cup in both hands, staring at nothing. My father, Martin, wasn't there. A nurse from the clinic had arrived early to take him back for an appointment, and Grandma's staff spoke about it like it was a simple schedule, not a life being carried in pieces. After breakfast, I stepped outside into the cold London air. Snow had dusted the street during the night, and the world looked clean in a way that felt unfair. I walked without a plan, past neat rows of buildings and silent cars, until my phone buzzed. It was a message from Diane, my manager in Manchester, asking if I could cover an extra shift next week. I stared at the screen and almost laughed. In my real world, a big question is whether I can take 2 extra rooms on my list. In Grandma's world, a big question is profit. I replied yes because I needed the money, then slipped the phone back into my coat and kept walking. I ended up in a small cafe not far from Grandma's house, one of those places where the chairs don't match and nobody cares if you sit too long. I ordered a tea for £3 and chose a table by the window. A woman behind the counter wore a name tag that said Sophie. She smiled at me like I mattered, and I realized how rare that felt in Grandma's home. As I sipped the tea, I thought about my job at the Riverside Hotel. I thought about how much waste I saw every day, half-used soap bars thrown away, tiny bottles left unopened, clean towels replaced because someone used one corner. I thought about guests asking for things that could have been handled faster if the hotel was organized better. Most people think cleaners see nothing. The truth is we see everything because we are in the rooms when nobody is performing. My mind started to connect little dots. Not a dream, not a perfect idea, but a practical one. At the hotel, I noticed that staff wasted time walking back and forth for supplies. We ran out of basic items because nobody tracked them properly, then rushed to replace them at the last minute. Guests complained about small things that could have been solved with simple systems. Even the lost and found was a mess. I realized I didn't need to own new trend to understand how to improve a business. I already understood one, from the bottom up, and I understood it better than people in suits who never scrubbed a bathtub. I took out my notebook, the cheap one I bought in Manchester for £2, and started writing. I wrote down the problems I saw at the hotel. Then I wrote down fixes that wouldn't cost much. A checklist for restocking that actually worked. A simple way to track linens and stop replacing what didn't need replacing. A fast method for reporting broken items so maintenance didn't get surprised. A small guest add-on list that could bring in extra money. Express laundry, snack baskets, quick room refreshes. I knew guests would pay because I'd seen it. A man once offered $50 just for someone to bring him a phone charger and a coffee in 10 minutes. People pay for comfort when they're tired. While I was writing, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Paula, my coworker. She sent a silly picture of our supply closet, stacked wrong as always, with the caption, "We're gonna die under these towels one day." I smiled. Then my smile faded. Paula and I work hard, and still we barely move forward. Meanwhile, Grandma sits at a long table asking about profit like it's a game. I felt something shift inside me, like shame turning into anger, and anger turning into courage. When I returned to Grandma's house later that afternoon, I didn't go straight inside. I stood at the gate for a moment, looking up at the windows. The place looked untouchable, but I realized something important. Grandma's power wasn't magic. It was built on money, yes, but also on fear. People were afraid of her disapproval, afraid of losing comfort, afraid of being called a joke. I had been afraid too, and that fear had made me quiet. I found my father in the sitting room before the nurse took him back to the clinic. He looked tired, but he tried to sit up when I entered. "Harper," he said softly, "I'll talk to her. I'll tell her the truth." I shook my head. "You can," I said, "but it won't be enough." He frowned, confused, and my mother leaned closer, watching me carefully. I held up my notebook. "She wants proof," I said. "She wants numbers. She wants control." My father's eyes flickered to the pages. "What is that?" he asked. "It's my proof," I said. "Not about new trend. About me." I took a breath and kept my voice steady. "I'm done being the cover for our problems. I'm done shrinking. If she wants profit so badly, I'll show her what I can build from the life I actually live." My father looked at me like he wanted to protect me from the fight ahead. But I wasn't asking for protection anymore. I was choosing my own ground. And as the nurse called his name and my father stood slowly to leave, I realized I had something I didn't have the night of Christmas dinner: a direction, a plan, and a voice that finally sounded like mine. The week after Christmas moved fast, like the days were trying to run away from what happened at Grandma Beatrice's table. I went back to Manchester, England, and my life snapped into its usual shape. Early alarms, cold tram windows, the gray uniform at the Riverside Hotel. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't just cleaning rooms anymore. I was watching patterns, counting waste, and writing notes in my small notebook during breaks. Diane, my manager, noticed me checking supply lists more than normal. "You planning to steal the towels, love?" she joked. I smiled and told her the truth in simple words. "I'm trying to make this place run better." She raised her eyebrows like she didn't know whether to laugh or take me seriously, then said, "If you can stop us running out of soap every other day, I'll frame your photo." I started small so nobody could accuse me of making trouble. I made a clear restock sheet and taped it inside the supply closet. I marked what we actually needed, not what someone guessed we needed. I asked Paula to try it with me for 3 days. She rolled her eyes at first, but she agreed. By the second day, we weren't rushing back and forth for missing items. By the third day, we had fewer complaints about no shampoo and no towels. I tracked the numbers the best I could. Even with my rough counting, I could see we used less and wasted less. It wasn't magic. It was attention. It was care. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of something I did. On Friday, I asked Diane if I could show her my notes after shift. We sat in her tiny office where the heater always made the air too dry. I explained my idea in easy words: simple systems to cut waste and small paid options for guests who wanted speed and comfort. I didn't talk like a businesswoman. I talked like a cleaner who sees everything. Diane listened, tapping her pen. When I finished, she stared at my notebook and said, "You've been thinking about this while you're scrubbing toilets?" I nodded, embarrassed. She leaned back and let out a low whistle. "All right, Harper," she said. "I'll give you a trial. 2 weeks. If it saves us money or brings in extra, I'll back you. If it causes chaos, you'll owe me a coffee and an apology." I agreed, so fast I nearly tripped over my own words. By the end of the first week, the changes were already showing. We replaced fewer items that didn't need replacing. We found broken things sooner and fixed them before guests complained. Diane ran the numbers with her own reports, not just my notes. She called me into her office again and slid a paper across the desk. "Roughly $1,600 saved," she said, "and 2,900 pounds earned from add-ons, mostly express laundry and snack baskets." "I'm shocked, love." I stared at the paper like it was a door opening. It wasn't a billion. It wasn't even 100,000. But it was real. It was mine. That same night, my mother called from London, England. Her voice was careful. "Your grandmother invited everyone for dinner on Sunday," she said. "She says she wants to talk about business." I could hear the fear under her words, the old fear that made us bend. I looked at my notebook, at the neat lines and small totals, and I felt my spine straighten. "I'll come," I said. My mother went quiet, then whispered, "Harper, you don't have to." "Yes," I said gently. "I do." Sunday arrived cold and bright. I took the train down and walked into Grandma's Kensington house, wearing a simple black dress I bought for £28. My hands were steady this time. The same faces sat at the table: Graham, Nina, Lily, and the others who smiled too hard. My father, Martin, was there too, looking tired but present. Grandma Beatrice sat at the head like she owned the air. She waited until everyone settled, then looked straight at me. "So," she said, "new trend, the profit." Her voice had that calm sharpness again, like she wanted me to flinch. I didn't flinch. I took a breath and spoke clearly. "I don't manage new trend," I said. The room froze. My cousin Lily's phone stayed on the table, untouched. My uncle's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Grandma's eyes narrowed.
"Then you lied," she said.
"No," I answered. "You believed a story someone told to keep you pleased." I turned my head and looked at my father for a moment, not to punish him, but to show the truth had finally reached daylight. Then I looked back at Grandma. "I'm a cleaner at a hotel in Manchester," I said. "But I built a small system that saved money and earned money. These are the numbers." I placed a folder on the table. Inside were Diane's reports, my notes, and a simple summary page. Grandma picked it up slowly and read without expression. I could see her eyes move across the figures. $1,600 saved, £2,900 earned, with a plan for the next month. The room stayed silent long enough to make my heartbeat loud again, but this time it didn't scare me. It reminded me I was alive. Grandma finally set the folder down. Her voice was quiet. "You turned cleaning into a business," she said. "I turned my work into proof," I answered. She studied me like she was meeting me for the first time. Then she said, "Next dinner, bring updated numbers." It wasn't praise. It wasn't warmth. But it also wasn't dismissal. And as I sat there, still a woman with a cheap dress and tired hands, I realized something important. I didn't need Grandma's approval to exist. I just needed my own courage to keep going.